My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm about to tell you a story that proves that life has a way of coming full circle in the most unexpected ways. It's a story about dignity, determination, and how sometimes the people who refuse to help us become the very ones who need our help the most. What happened to me 15 years ago changed not only my life, but also taught me that success isn't just about money. It's about character. It was a cold December morning in 2008 when my world completely fell apart. I was 28 years old, a single mother to my 6-year-old daughter, Emma, and I had just lost my job as a marketing coordinator at a small advertising firm. The company had gone bankrupt during the financial crisis, and like millions of Americans, I found myself unemployed with bills piling up and no savings to fall back on. Emma had been sick with pneumonia for 2 weeks, and the medical bills were mounting. Our small apartment in Queens was modest, but it was home, and I was 3 months behind on rent. The landlord had already served me with an eviction notice, and I had exactly 7 days to come up with $4,200, or we would be homeless. I had exhausted every option I could think of. I had applied for emergency assistance, reached out to family members who were struggling themselves, and even tried to get a loan from the bank. But my credit score had been destroyed by medical debt from Emma's previous hospitalizations. She had been born with a heart condition that required regular monitoring and occasional emergency treatments. That's when my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, told me about Richard Blackstone. "He's one of the richest men in the city," she said, showing me a newspaper article about his latest business acquisition. "He owns half the real estate in Manhattan. They say he started from nothing and built an empire. Maybe he would understand your situation." Richard Blackstone was indeed a success story. At 45, he had built Blackstone Enterprises from a single small construction company into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that included real estate development, luxury hotels, and investment firms. The newspapers loved to write about his lavish lifestyle: the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the collection of luxury cars, the private jet, and the exclusive parties attended by celebrities and politicians. But what gave me hope was his backstory. According to the articles, he had grown up poor in Brooklyn, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. If anyone would understand my situation, I thought, it would be someone who had been where I was. I spent 3 days trying to get an appointment with him. His assistants were polite but firm. Mr. Blackstone didn't take unsolicited meetings, especially not for personal requests. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you do things you never thought you would do. On Thursday morning, I put on my best dress, a navy blue outfit I had worn to job interviews, and took Emma to school. Then I went to the Blackstone Tower, a gleaming 60-story building in Midtown Manhattan that served as the headquarters for his empire. The lobby was intimidating: marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and security guards who looked like they could bench press a car. I approached the reception desk with my heart pounding. "I need to see Mr. Blackstone," I told the receptionist, a perfectly groomed woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "No, but it's urgent. It's a personal matter. I just need 5 minutes." She looked at me with the kind of polite disdain that wealthy people's employees perfect over time. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Blackstone doesn't see anyone without an appointment. You can submit a written request through our website." "Please," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I'm a single mother, and my daughter and I are about to be evicted. I just need someone to listen." "Security will escort you out if you don't leave voluntarily," she said, her voice cold as ice. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of humiliation and desperation. But then I remembered Emma, and I found my courage. "Then I'll wait," I said, sitting down in one of the leather chairs in the lobby. "I'll wait until he comes down." For 6 hours, I sat in that lobby. I watched executives in expensive suits come and go, their shoes clicking on the marble floor as they discussed deals worth millions of dollars. Security guards kept an eye on me, but I wasn't causing trouble. I was just sitting there, waiting. At 4:30 p.m., the elevator doors opened, and Richard Blackstone himself stepped out. I recognized him immediately from the newspaper photos, but seeing him in person was different. He was tall and imposing, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. He wore a suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had never been told no. I stood up quickly, my heart racing. "Mr. Blackstone?" He stopped and looked at me with curiosity rather than annoyance. "Yes? My name is Sarah Martinez. I've been waiting here all day because I need your help. I'm a single mother, and my daughter and I are about to be evicted. I just need a loan, $4,200. I'll pay it back with interest. I just need someone to give me a chance." For a moment, his expression softened, and I thought I saw something like recognition in his eyes. Maybe he was remembering his own childhood, his own mother's struggles. But then his face hardened again. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice cold and businesslike, "I didn't build my fortune by giving handouts to every sob story that walks through my door. If you're in financial trouble, that's your responsibility to solve. I suggest you find a job, work harder, and stop looking for easy solutions." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Mr. Blackstone, please. I'm not looking for a handout. I'm asking for a loan. I'll sign any contract, pay any interest rate. I just need help getting back on my feet." "The answer is no," he said firmly. "And if I see you in my building again, I'll have security remove you permanently." He walked past me toward the exit, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of his rejection sank in. "You know what?" I called after him, my voice stronger than I felt. "Someday you're going to need help too. And when that day comes, I hope someone shows you more kindness than you've shown me." He didn't turn around. He just kept walking, disappearing through the revolving doors and into his waiting limousine. I left the building that day feeling more humiliated and hopeless than I had ever felt in my life. But as I rode the subway back to Queens, something began to change inside me. The humiliation was transforming into something else: determination. That night, after I put Emma to bed, I sat at our small kitchen table and made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let Richard Blackstone's rejection define me. I was going to prove him wrong. I called my landlord and negotiated a payment plan that would give me 2 more weeks. I sold everything I could: my jewelry, my laptop, even some of Emma's toys that she had outgrown. I managed to scrape together enough money to keep us housed for another month. Then I started looking for work with a vengeance. I applied for every job I could find, from retail positions to office work to freelance marketing projects. I was willing to do anything legal to support my daughter and build a better life for us. 3 weeks after my encounter with Richard Blackstone, I got a call from a small tech startup called InnovateTech. They needed someone to help with their marketing, and while they couldn't afford to pay much, they offered me equity in the company. "We can't pay you what you're worth right now," said the founder, a young entrepreneur named David Kim. "But if you believe in what we're building, this could be the opportunity of a lifetime." The company was developing software that would revolutionize how businesses managed their customer relationships. It was risky. Most startups fail, but I had nothing left to lose. "I'll take it," I said without hesitation. That decision changed everything. For the next 2 years, I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. I put in 60-hour weeks learning everything I could about technology, business development, and startup culture. I helped InnovateTech develop their marketing strategy, build their brand, and attract their first major clients. Emma was my motivation every day. When I was exhausted, when I wanted to give up, I would think about her and remember why I was fighting so hard. I wanted to build a life where she would never have to beg anyone for help, where she would have every opportunity to succeed. The company grew rapidly. Our software was innovative and effective, and word spread quickly through the business community. By 2011, we had attracted the attention of major investors, and by 2013, we were one of the fastest-growing tech companies in New York. My equity stake, which had seemed like a desperate gamble, was now worth millions of dollars. But success didn't make me forget where I had come from. I remembered every day of struggle, every night I had worried about keeping a roof over Emma's head, and every person who had helped me along the way. I also remembered the people who had refused to help, especially Richard Blackstone. As InnovateTech continued to grow, we began acquiring other companies and expanding into new markets. I had been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, then to Chief Operating Officer, and finally, in 2015, the board of directors asked me to become CEO. "You've been the driving force behind this company's success," David Kim told me. "It's time for you to lead it officially." At 35, I was the CEO of a company worth over $500 million, with offices in 12 cities and more than 2,000 employees. Emma was now 13, a brilliant student who spoke 3 languages and had already expressed interest in studying business and technology. But my story with Richard Blackstone wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. In late 2015, I learned that Blackstone Enterprises was facing serious financial difficulties. The real estate market had shifted. Several of their major developments had failed, and they were struggling with massive debt. The company that had once seemed invincible was now on the verge of bankruptcy. That's when I received a call that would bring my story full circle. "Ms. Martinez," said the voice on the phone, "this is Jonathan Hayes, CFO of Blackstone Enterprises. We understand that InnovateTech is looking to expand into real estate technology. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership." I smiled as I hung up the phone. After 7 years, Richard Blackstone needed something from me. And this time, I would be the one deciding whether to help. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. in the same building where I had been humiliated and rejected 7 years earlier. But this time, I would be walking in as an equal. No, as someone with the power to save or destroy Richard Blackstone's empire. As I prepared for that meeting, I thought about the woman I had been 7 years ago. Desperate, humiliated, and powerless. And I thought about the woman I had become. Successful, confident, and in control of my own destiny. Richard Blackstone was about to learn that the poor woman he had refused to help had become someone he couldn't afford to ignore. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of my tailored Armani suit. The woman looking back at me was a far cry from the desperate single mother who had begged for help in this very building 7 years ago. My hair was professionally styled, my makeup flawless, and my confidence unshakable. But more importantly, I carried myself with the quiet authority that comes from having built something meaningful from nothing. Emma, now 13 and wise beyond her years, knocked on my door. "Mom, are you nervous about your big meeting today?" I turned to her and smiled. "Not nervous, sweetheart. Just reflective. Sometimes life gives us opportunities to show people who we really are. Is this about that mean man who wouldn't help us when I was little?" I had told Emma the story when she was old enough to understand it, not out of bitterness, but as a lesson about resilience and the importance of treating everyone with dignity. Yes, it is. But remember, this isn't about revenge. It's about showing grace under pressure and making the right business decision. I know, Mom. You always say that success is the best response to people who doubt you. As my driver navigated through Manhattan traffic toward the Blackstone Tower, I reviewed the files my team had prepared. Blackstone Enterprises was in worse shape than I had initially thought. They were $2.3 billion in debt, had defaulted on several major loans, and were facing foreclosure on 3 of their most valuable properties. Their stock price had fallen 78% in the past 18 months, and industry analysts were predicting bankruptcy within 6 months. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who had told me to work harder and stop looking for easy solutions was now looking for his own easy solution to save his crumbling empire. When I arrived at the Blackstone Tower, the same marble lobby that had once intimidated me now felt familiar and manageable. The receptionist, a different woman from 7 years ago, greeted me with the kind of deference reserved for important clients. "Ms. Martinez, welcome to Blackstone Tower. Mr. Blackstone is waiting for you in the executive conference room on the 58th floor." As the elevator climbed toward the top of the building, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. After becoming CEO of InnovateTech, I had led the company through a period of unprecedented growth. We had developed revolutionary software that helped businesses optimize their operations, and our client list included Fortune 500 companies across every major industry. But more than that, I had built a company culture based on the values I wished I had encountered during my darkest days: compassion, opportunity, and the belief that everyone deserves a chance to succeed. We offered comprehensive benefits, paid family leave, and educational opportunities for all employees. We also established a foundation that provided microloans to struggling single parents, the kind of help I had desperately needed 7 years ago. The elevator doors opened to reveal a luxurious reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of Manhattan. Jonathan Hayes, the CFO who had called me, was waiting with a nervous smile. "Ms. Martinez, thank you so much for coming. Mr. Blackstone is very excited to meet with you." I almost laughed at that. Richard Blackstone was excited to meet with me now that he needed something from me. Hayes led me through a corridor lined with expensive artwork and photographs of Blackstone's various business achievements from better times. We entered a massive conference room where Richard Blackstone sat at the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by several other executives. He stood as I entered, and I could see that the years had not been kind to him. His hair was completely gray now, and there were deep lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and sleepless nights. His suit was still expensive, but it hung differently on his frame, as if he had lost weight from worry. "Ms. Martinez," he said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you for taking this meeting. I've heard incredible things about what you've built with InnovateTech." I shook his hand firmly, looking directly into his eyes. For just a moment, I saw a flicker of recognition, as if he was trying to place where he had seen me before. But it was clear he didn't remember our previous encounter. "Mr. Blackstone?" I replied coolly. "I understand you're interested in discussing a potential partnership. Please, sit down. Can we get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you. Let's get straight to business." Hayes began the presentation, outlining Blackstone Enterprises' current situation and their vision for incorporating technology into their real estate operations. It was a desperate pitch disguised as a business opportunity, and everyone in the room knew it. "We believe that InnovateTech's software could revolutionize how we manage our properties," Hayes explained. Your customer relationship management system, combined with your data analytics capabilities, could help us optimize everything from tenant relations to maintenance scheduling. And in return, I asked, we're prepared to offer InnovateTech an exclusive partnership agreement, Blackstone said, leaning forward. You would become our sole technology provider, with guaranteed contracts worth $50 million annually for the next 5 years. It was a substantial offer, but I could see the desperation behind it. They needed this partnership more than they were letting on. That's interesting, I said. But I have to ask, why InnovateTech? There are larger technology companies that specialize in real estate solutions. Because you're the best, Blackstone said quickly. Your reputation in the industry is impeccable. Your software is cutting edge. And frankly, we believe in supporting innovative companies led by visionary entrepreneurs. The flattery was thick, but I maintained my professional composure. I appreciate that, Mr. Blackstone, but I'm curious about something else. What happens if Blackstone Enterprises can't fulfill its financial obligations under this partnership? The room fell silent. Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and I could see Blackstone's jaw tighten. I'm not sure I understand the question, Blackstone said. I think you do, I replied calmly. My research indicates that Blackstone Enterprises is facing significant financial challenges, debt-to-equity ratios that would concern any potential partner. I need to understand how you plan to honor a $250 million commitment when your company is reportedly on the verge of bankruptcy. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Finally, Blackstone spoke, his voice strained. Ms. Martinez, I'll be frank with you. Yes, we're facing some challenges. The real estate market has been difficult, and we've had some setbacks. But that's exactly why this partnership is so important. Your technology could help us turn things around. So you're asking InnovateTech to essentially provide you with a lifeline, I said, to invest our resources and reputation in a company that may not survive the next 6 months. We're asking for a partnership that would benefit both companies, Hayes interjected. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. From this height, I could see for miles, the same view that Richard Blackstone had enjoyed while building his empire. But now, that empire was crumbling, and he was asking for help from someone he had once dismissed as unworthy of his time. Mr. Blackstone, I said, turning back to face him, do you remember meeting me before? He looked confused. I don't think so. I meet a lot of people in business. 7 years ago, December 2008. I came to this building, sat in your lobby for 6 hours, and asked you for help. I was a single mother facing eviction, and I needed a loan of $4,200 to keep my daughter and me from becoming homeless. I watched as the color drained from his face. The recognition was dawning, and with it, the realization of just how dramatically our positions had reversed. You told me, I continued, that you didn't build your fortune by giving handouts to every sob story that walked through your door. You told me to find a job, work harder, and stop looking for easy solutions. Do you remember that? Blackstone's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The other executives in the room looked uncomfortable, sensing that this meeting had taken an unexpected turn. I do remember, he finally whispered. I was desperate, I said. I was a woman who had lost her job through no fault of her own, whose daughter was sick, and who was facing homelessness. I came to you because I had heard that you understood what it was like to struggle, that you had grown up poor, and might have compassion for someone in a similar situation. Ms. Martinez, I'm not finished, I said firmly. You not only refused to help me, but you humiliated me. You had security threaten to remove me from the building. You made me feel like I was worthless, like my struggles didn't matter because I wasn't successful enough to deserve your time. The room was dead silent. Blackstone looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. But you know what? I continued. In a way, I should thank you, because your rejection taught me something valuable. It taught me that I couldn't depend on the kindness of people like you. It taught me that I had to build my own success, create my own opportunities, and never put myself in a position where I had to beg for help again. I walked back to the table and placed my hands on the back of my chair. So here we are 7 years later. You need help, and I'm in a position to provide it. The question is, what kind of person do you think I am? Do you think I'm the kind of person who would refuse to help someone in need? Do you think I would humiliate you the way you humiliated me? Blackstone's voice was barely audible. I don't know. Well, let me tell you what kind of person I am, I said. I'm the kind of person who believes that everyone deserves a second chance. I'm the kind of person who remembers what it feels like to be desperate and powerless. And I'm the kind of person who believes that success comes with the responsibility to help others. I sat back down and opened my briefcase, pulling out a contract that my legal team had prepared. InnovateTech will enter into a partnership with Blackstone Enterprises, I said. but not the partnership you proposed. We're going to acquire 51% of your company for $1, $2 billion, which will be enough to pay off your debts and provide working capital for restructuring. You'll remain as CEO, but you'll report to me as chairman of the board." Blackstone stared at the contract in shock. You're buying my company?" "I'm saving your company," I corrected. "And I'm saving the jobs of your 3,000 employees. But I'm doing it on my terms, with my values, and with a management structure that ensures this company will never again be run by someone who lacks compassion for people in need." I slid the contract across the table. "You have 48 hours to consider the offer. But understand this, it's the only offer you're going to get. Every other potential investor has already walked away." As I stood to leave, Blackstone finally found his voice. "Why?" he asked. "After what I did to you, why would you help me?" I paused at the door and looked back at him. "Because, Mr. Blackstone, I'm not you. I don't believe in kicking people when they're down. I believe in lifting them up, even when they don't deserve it, especially when they don't deserve it. And because," I added with a slight smile, "someone once told me that someday you would need help too. And when that day came, I hoped someone would show you more kindness than you had shown me. Today is that day, and I'm that someone." I left the conference room with my head held high, knowing that I had just proven something important, not just to Richard Blackstone but to myself. Success isn't about having power over others. It's about using that power to make the world a little bit better. The elevator ride down felt different this time. I wasn't leaving in humiliation and defeat. I was leaving as someone who had chosen compassion over revenge, who had turned a moment of potential triumph into an opportunity for grace. But the story wasn't over yet. Richard Blackstone now had a choice to make, and his decision would determine not just the future of his company, but the kind of man he wanted to be. 2 days later, I was in my office at InnovateTech headquarters when my assistant buzzed me on the intercom. "Ms. Martinez, Richard Blackstone is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I couldn't help but smile at the irony. 7 years ago, I had been the one showing up without an appointment, desperate for a few minutes of his time. Now the roles were completely reversed. "Send him in," I said. Richard Blackstone entered my office looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie slightly askew, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He carried a leather briefcase and moved with the uncertain gait of someone whose world had been turned upside down. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice hoarse, "thank you for seeing me. Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "No, thank you." He sat down heavily and placed the briefcase on his lap. "I've come to accept your offer." He opened the briefcase and pulled out the contract I had given him, now signed and notarized. But there was something else in his expression, something beyond defeat or resignation. It looked almost like relief. "I've also brought something else," he said, reaching into the briefcase again. He pulled out a cashier's check and placed it on my desk. "This is for $4,200 plus 7 years of compound interest at the prime rate. It comes to $6,147. I stared at the check, understanding immediately what it represented. It was the loan I had asked for 7 years ago, the money that could have saved me from humiliation and hardship. "Mr. Blackstone," I said softly, "that's not necessary." "Yes, it is," he said firmly. "It's 7 years too late, but it's necessary. I should have helped you then, and I didn't. I can't change that, but I can acknowledge it." I picked up the check and looked at it for a long moment, then I tore it in half. "Mr. Blackstone, I don't need your money. I never needed your money. What I needed 7 years ago was someone to believe in me, to see my potential instead of just my problems. What I needed was basic human decency." His face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he might cry. "I failed you completely. I was everything that was wrong with success. Arrogant, heartless, and blind to the struggles of others. I became the kind of person I swore I'd never become when I was growing up poor in Brooklyn." "What changed?" I asked. "What made you realize that?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "After you left the conference room 2 days ago, I couldn't stop thinking about what you said. I went home and looked at myself in the mirror, really looked at myself, and I didn't like what I saw." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I called my mother that night. She's 83 now, living in a nursing home in Queens. I told her what had happened, about how I had treated you 7 years ago, and how you had responded when you had the power to destroy me." "What did she say?" "She cried," he said simply. "She cried and told me that she had raised me better than that. She reminded me of all the times people had helped our family when we had nothing, and she asked me when I had stopped paying it forward." He looked up at me with eyes that seemed genuinely remorseful. I realized that somewhere along the way, I had forgotten where I came from. I had forgotten what it felt like to be powerless, to need help, to depend on the kindness of others. Success had made me cruel, and I didn't even realize it was happening. Success doesn't make people cruel, I said. It just reveals who they really are. But people can change if they want to. I want to change, he said earnestly. I want to be the kind of person who helps instead of hurts. I want to build something meaningful instead of just accumulating wealth. And I want to learn from you how to do that. Over the next several months, the acquisition of Blackstone Enterprises proceeded smoothly. I kept my word about allowing Richard to remain as CEO, but I implemented significant changes in the company's culture and practices. We established an employee assistance fund to help workers facing financial emergencies. We created mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. We instituted policies that prioritized affordable housing development over luxury projects that only served the wealthy. But the most significant change was in Richard Blackstone himself. He threw himself into the company's new mission with the fervor of a convert. He personally oversaw the employee assistance program, often staying late to review applications and ensure that people got the help they needed. He visited construction sites regularly, not just to check on progress, but to talk with workers and understand their challenges. One day, about 6 months after the acquisition, he came to my office with a proposal that surprised me. I want to step down as CEO, he said. Why? I asked. You've been doing excellent work. The company is profitable again, employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, and we're making a real difference in the community. That's exactly why I want to step down, he said. I've learned what I needed to learn from you. I've remembered who I used to be and who I want to be again. But I think it's time for me to start over, to build something new from the ground up. What do you have in mind? I want to start a nonprofit organization focused on helping single parents avoid homelessness. I want to provide the kind of help you needed 7 years ago. Not just money, but job training, childcare assistance, legal aid, and emotional support. I was impressed by his vision, but I had to ask the obvious question. Richard, you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Why do you need to step down from a successful company to start a nonprofit? Because I need to prove to myself that I can build something meaningful without the safety net of wealth, he said. I want to start with just enough money to get by the way you did. I want to remember what it feels like to struggle for something worthwhile. It was a remarkable transformation. The man who had once dismissed struggling people as looking for easy solutions now wanted to dedicate his life to helping them. I have a better idea, I said. Don't step down as CEO. Instead, let's expand Blackstone Enterprises to include a nonprofit division. You can run both the for-profit and nonprofit sides, and we can use the company's resources to support your mission. His eyes lit up. You would do that? Richard, the goal was never to punish you. The goal was to create something better. If you're committed to this mission, then let's do it right. We spent the next year developing what became the Blackstone Foundation for Family Stability. The foundation provided emergency financial assistance, job training, child care support, and housing assistance to single parents and families in crisis. Richard personally reviewed every application and often visited families to understand their situations firsthand. One day, he called me with excitement in his voice. Sarah, you need to come see this. I met him at one of the foundation's job training centers in Queens, not far from where I had lived during my darkest days. The center was bustling with activity, single mothers learning computer skills, fathers training for construction jobs, teenagers getting help with college applications. Look at this, Richard said, showing me a letter from a woman named Maria Santos. She's a single mother of 3 who was facing eviction 6 months ago. We helped her with emergency rent assistance and enrolled her in our medical assistant training program. She just got a job at Mount Sinai Hospital with full benefits. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely moved by the story. But that's not the best part, he continued. She wrote that she wants to volunteer at the center on weekends to help other families going through what she went through. She wants to pay it forward. I watched Richard as he talked with the families in the center, and I could see that he had found something he had been missing for years. Purpose beyond profit. He wasn't just helping people. He was connecting with them, learning from them, and allowing their stories to change him. A year later, Emma graduated from high school as valedictorian and was accepted to Harvard Business School with a full scholarship. At her graduation party, she pulled me aside. Mom, I want you to know that everything you went through when I was little, everything you built afterward, it all taught me what really matters in life. What's that, sweetheart? That success isn't about how much money you make or how powerful you become. It's about how many people you help along the way and how you treat people when they need you most. I hugged her tightly, knowing that the most important thing I had built wasn't a company or a fortune. It was a daughter who understood the value of compassion and service. At the party, Richard Blackstone approached me with a glass of champagne in his hand. I have something to tell you, he said. The foundation just reached a milestone. We've helped our 1,000th family avoid homelessness. That's incredible, Richard. You should be proud. I am proud, he said. But more than that, I'm grateful. Grateful that you showed me what real success looks like. Grateful that you chose compassion over revenge. And grateful that you gave me a chance to become the person I should have been all along. He paused, looking out at the celebration around us. 7 years ago, I thought I was successful because I had money and power. But I was actually a failure as a human being. You, on the other hand, had nothing but your dignity and your determination, and you were already more successful than I was. We're all works in progress, Richard. The important thing is that we keep trying to become better. I have one more thing to tell you, he said with a smile. I'm getting married next month to a woman I met at the foundation. She's a social worker who volunteers there. She's teaching me that love, like success, is about giving rather than taking. As I looked around the party that night, at Emma laughing with her friends, at Richard talking animatedly about the foundation's work, at all the people whose lives had been touched by our journey, I realized that the story that began with rejection and humiliation had become something beautiful. The millionaire who had refused to help a poor woman had indeed learned what it meant to need help. But more than that, he had learned what it meant to give help, to find purpose in service, and to measure success not by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. And the poor woman who had been rejected had become not just his boss, but his teacher, showing him that true power lies not in the ability to say no to those in need, but in the wisdom to say yes, even to those who don't deserve it. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating our enemies, but from helping them become better people. Sometimes the most successful revenge is showing grace when you have every right to show none. And sometimes, the people who hurt us the most become the people who teach us the most about who we want to be. Legal disclaimer. This story is completely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, actual events, or real institutions is purely coincidental.